much for being here.
So I'm Chris Clamp. I teach at Southern New Hampshire University, and I have a relationship with Mondragon going back to 1982 when I went there as a 28-year-old grad student collecting data for my dissertation, looking at the management of the cooperatives, and was fortunate enough to be welcomed in by the head of the bank, who was one of the three founders, and his public relations department, which was headed up by the son of First Basque president. And I was able to interview three managers in each of about a fourth of the cooperatives for my dissertation, and have had the good fortune that over the years I've been able to go back multiple times. And in fact, my older daughter lived in Mondragon for much of a year as a Cervantes Fellow, working with the Machine Tool Institute in Elgo Ibar and living with my good friends in Mondragon. So it's a relationship that's taken on multiple facets for me over time. Rebecca.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Rebecca Moix. I have a background in accounting and finance in various industries, and have spent the past 11 years at INTRUST IT, where about 5 years ago we implemented open book management to help us transition to employee ownership through an ESOP. And that was a couple years ago. So now I teach financial and business literacy training to all of our employees and also administer our ESOP. And a few years ago, I met the co-op Cincy team, Christina and Ellen, and was really inspired and excited about the work they're doing here in Cincinnati. And I help coach a couple of the co-ops in open book management and how they can work to get all of their employees educated and engaged in the financial management of the organization. So I'm really passionate about employee ownership, coming at it from a slightly different angle, but I'm super excited to be here and be part of this great event.
So Paloma, you want to pull up the slides? Thank you. So if you could go to the slide, the first slide on the principles, which is the third slide in. All right, so let me just give you a quick overview. There's 10 cooperative principles that are incorporated into Mondragon's corporate management model. And just briefly, the first is open and free participation in the cooperative, meaning that there's not discrimination against people on the basis of religion, ethnic identity, or political beliefs, and that this is something they felt is important to the cooperatives over their history. Second principle is democratic organization, which is the commitment to one person, one vote system for elections, and I'll take a deeper dive on that in a minute. Third is the sovereignty of labor, which is that profit is allocated on the basis of the work contributed by each member to achieve profit. Fourth is instrumental and subordinated nature of capital, meaning that capital is a necessary resource, but it does not take precedent over the labor. Fifth is the participation in management. This is another principle that I'll give you a deeper exploration of in terms of people's responsibility in the administration and management of the business. Wage solidarity is the sixth principle, and this is about establishing fair and equitable levels of compensation, both internally and externally, and has translated into a ratio historically that was 1 to 3 between the lowest and highest earnings, and in many cases it's been extended to 1 to 6 to make it a system that was sustainable for them. Intercooperation is the seventh principle, and this is the commitment between the cooperatives and the secondary support cooperatives to align themselves and be able to support each other in terms of efficiencies and having a shared messaging and branding. Social transformation is the 8th principle, and this is looking at supportive business development in an environment that returns typically about 10% of the profits back to the foundation in support of local community and also cooperatives in need. The 9th principle is on universality, and this is the commitment of the cooperatives to be involved and fully embracing the goals of the international cooperative movement. And lastly, education, which I will also talk about here in terms of promoting people and the cooperative culture and how that is realized. Next slide, please. So the first principle I wanted to talk about is principle number 2, which is democratic organization and how this is embedded in the structure of the cooperatives. So with the principle of one person, one vote, the system for election in the cooperatives ensures that workers have voice, and that voice has meaning in terms of the operation of the cooperative. Next slide, please. If you could just, Paloma, click through to get, yeah, there's probably 2 more. Thank you, that's it. So when you look at this, the General Assembly is at the top of the hierarchy here, and you see it on the second column. And the General Assembly elects the governing council in each cooperative. The governing council, in turn, elects the executive board, which coordinates functions between the management council and the governing council. The management council is comprised of the general manager and the management team. So each year there's an annual General Assembly. These are typically in the spring. And before the General Assemblies, the cooperative usually runs pre-meetings that are in smaller gatherings to prepare people to be able to fully participate in the General Assembly. I know firsthand because a good friend of mine heads up the Eroski Consumer Cooperative. And unfortunately, when I go to visit Mondragon in the spring, he's often very tied up with pre-General Assembly meetings, working with the consumer and worker members. So this is something that I know they take very seriously in their operation and ensuring that the governance model is effective. Many cooperatives have been challenged by low turnout for the General Assemblies. So one of the things that they strategize around is how to entice people to take their responsibility to participate in the General Assembly seriously. So they may use incentives like swag and raffles to bring people into the General Assembly meetings. The membership can also call extraordinary sessions at the request of 20% of the members. And the governing council has responsibilities for oversight of the economic performance of the cooperative, its social functions, and legislative and institutional policies. Finally, it's comprised of 12 members who serve 4-year terms, and the seats are renewed every 2 years. So half of the board seats are up for re-election every 2 years. So that's the basic structure. A couple of other things I want to mention is that the manager cannot be eligible for serving on the board. And the watchdog committee, which you see cited here in the slide, this is something that's mandated through co-op law. And the members of the watchdog committee also cannot serve at the same time on the governing council. You also see here the social council. And if you were in the first session, the plenary session, you heard Kristen mention the social council in that discussion. And for those of us familiar with the union co-op model, we would see the social council in many ways serving some of the functions that ideally worker trade union representatives serve. It's really about ensuring that the internal operation of the cooperative is accountable and responsive to issues raised by the workers. The first development of the social council came out of a labor strike in what was then Ulgor. And they realized that they needed another body besides the General Assembly's participation through the governing council to ensure that members could address internal matters. And the difference with the social council is the elections are held by the work unit, whereas the General Assembly is more like what we would know in the United States as general elections, where you have your candidates and they run their campaigns. So the social council meets monthly, and it has a responsibility to carry back information to the workers that they represent, to provide them up-to-date information about issues that are surfacing around the operation of the cooperative. So it plays a very important role also in the development of worker owners for leadership in the cooperative, because typically you serve on the social council before you would be considered a candidate for the governing council. So that's the basic structure that you find in what they refer to as the primary societies or the worker cooperatives. Next slide, please. In this diagram, what you see here is what I refer to as the superstructure. This is the overarching structure that we would refer to as Mondragon Cooperative Corporation. And here you have a Congress that has 650 congressional representatives or delegates that are from the primary cooperatives. The Standing Commission that you see under the Congress box, operates on behalf of the cooperatives during the periods between meetings of the Congress, so that the cooperative group is able to maximize business efficiency, and it operates similar to a governing board. It's comprised of elected representatives designated by the cooperative groups. They must be a member of a cooperative. The industrial group has 12 votes with 14 representatives. Distribution, which you can see is now the largest in terms of worker members, has 4 representatives and 4 votes. Finance has 2 representatives and 2 votes. The knowledge sector has 1 representative with 1 vote. And in the industrial sector, no single division. And you see the divisions represented in the listing to the right of the circle with the industrial sign on it. Members from the industrial group, no single division can have more than 2 representatives and 2 votes. So this is the basic model, and it gives you an idea of how things shape up. Just in terms of where people are in these, the financial group includes Laboral Cucha, which was originally started as Caja Laboral Popular, Lagunaro, which is the social insurance program, Seguros Lagunaro Aro Leasing, and FISO, which is the Fondo Interno Cooperativo de Solidaridad. The knowledge sector is comprised of Mondragon University, which has 3 schools, engineering, business faculty, and the School of Humanities and Education in it. Next slide, please. So the 5th principle is talking about participation in the management. And as you saw reflected in the other 2 slides that I shared, this is important to the group because worker members have obligations, and these are written into the internal arrangements regarding the rights and responsibilities of workers. So number 1 is that worker members have an obligation to participate economically by contributing to capital stock. And this happens both in terms of voluntary as well as required contributions. The required contributions are what constitutes the essentially opening the door as a member. The voluntary participation is opportunities that come up from time to time to add to the working capital of the cooperative. Workers diligently and are expected to work diligently, for the social goals of the cooperative and to advance the purposes of the firm. They're supposed to participate in the governance of the cooperative through the general assemblies and other membership bodies, such as the social council. They're to keep informed about the activities of the cooperative and to ask questions of the administrators about how the cooperative is running and about the finances of the co-op. And this is typically supposed to be done within 15 days of this information being shared with them by way of the social council. The social councils, as I said, meet monthly, and their representatives are expected to report back to the members on their discussions. So next slide, please. Oops, another slide. Thank you. So the, I think you went, yeah, go the other, yeah, thank you. Principle number 10 is where I wanted to go. So this is the last principle I wanted to touch on, and this one's looking at the importance of education. Mondragon got started by Father Arismendi Arrieta, who was a youth pastor in Mondragon, and education has been an important component to the way that they've thought about themselves and their role in the community. So education happens in three ways that I just want to summarize for you here. The first is that through professional development and cooperative education, they look to enhance the skills for leading the cooperatives and to effectively engage around the business of their firms. So the professional development is to provide members knowledge of cooperative norms and statutes that govern the firm, and the cooperatives commit resources for this recurrent education of their members. The other important piece of this is that Mondragon Cooperative Corporation sees that it has a commitment to the development of youth as future cooperators. And this is done through the Icastolas, which we had a nice conversation about in the last session. And just to summarize, the Icastolas have 120 members in the Basque regions of France and Spain. They employ 6,000 teachers who are worker members of their cooperatives, educating 60,000 students with an impact on over 40,000 families. And the Icastolas have a pedagogy that's promoting Basque curriculum based on social participation, responsibility, and competence development, all of which, as you can see, are important for developing an appreciation for the cooperative model. Mondragon University also is involved in this work. They recently enrolled 1,000 new students into their Lane program, which is their team academy. And they are, those students are expected to develop a cooperative as their capstone. And about half of the students successfully go on to be cooperative entrepreneurs. Education and Cooperative Promotion Fund is the last piece in terms of the education principle here. And that includes funds for purposes such as education, promotion of Basque culture, promotion of the Basque language, research and development, and consumer education. So you can see that this is important to their success. And the last thing I wanted to close with is just the story of what happened when they lost sight of the importance of worker members as worker owners. So as some of you may know, a few years ago, Fagor, the largest of the cooperatives, largely out of the 2008 recession, ran into trouble. They had acquired a plant in France called Brant, and so they were not able to have sufficient internal resources to deal with the downturn. A lot of their business activity was around new construction of housing in Spain, and they lost their market because the housing market tanked. Part of what was conveyed to me by colleagues at Mondragon is that when things soured financially for them, management and workers continued to operate as if everything was in normal times. And the sense in the group is that the worker members didn't step up to challenge management about how things were going, and management, in that failure to be challenged by the owners, kept on as usual until they ran out of materials and had no choice but to close. So I think with that, I'd like to hand it off to Rebecca, who can speak more about the importance of building that ownership.
Great, thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's a great segue into talking about creating an ownership mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide there. Ownership, giving worker members ownership or any other type of equity. The company I work for is a newly created ESOP, so we're an employee stock ownership program. It does create ownership, but one of the big questions or the lessons, as Chris just talked about from that example, is how do we really create a mentality where all of the workers or employee owners are thinking and acting like owners rather than like workers or employees. So how do we empower and engage everyone to have that right kind of mindset? And the answer to that is this last principle that we were talking about is education, and educating everyone about how the business works, what the financial results mean, and then specifically how every individual person, regardless of what job or role that they may play in the organization, how do they work towards the common goals of the organization to help make it successful. So education is what I like to call the secret sauce to making that ownership mentality and really making these principles real in a way that can move the organization forward. So that ownership mentality is really created through education. If you want to go to the next slide. So what we did at INTRUST is we transitioned to employee ownership, as I said, through an ESOP. But before that, we prepared for that by adopting an open book management methodology, which is called the Great Game of Business. When I started at the company, it was a traditionally owned by one or a few people, individual corporation, and the owner had decided that he wanted to sell to the employees when he was ready to retire, rather than to some other corporation where the jobs might not be there anymore. It might go somewhere different. So for the purpose of really supporting the employees and the community as well, transitioning to employee ownership was what we wanted to do. So in 2016, I believe, I went to the conference for this organization, the Great Game of Business. It's called the Gathering of the Games. And it was so inspiring to hear all of these companies that were educating and empowering their employees. They were being transparent with how the business was doing. They were teaching people how to read the financial statements. So every single person in the company, regardless of their role, understood how the company was doing, whether that was great or not so great, so that people could either be celebrating or helping to figure out solutions to issues that may be hurting the company. In 2017, we implemented it. We implemented, if you're not an employee-owned company, which we were not at the time, you implement a profit sharing scenario of some sort of a bonus, because the important part is, as the organization or the company, the better they're doing and the more profitable they are, every single employee should be sharing in some way in that success. Transitioning to actual employee ownership as an ESOP obviously is the next step, and really co-ops are even the next step of more equitable. But this is a model, the Great Game of Business open book management methodology, that can really work across any type of organization. So there's 3 principles, but 2 of them are directly related to what we've been talking about. The first one is know and teach the rules, which is basically educating all of your members, all of your employee owners about the business and the finances. The second one is follow the action and keep score. And that translates into open book management, into being totally transparent with sharing. We share almost all information, and any question is on the table if employees want to know how decisions are made, how the company is doing. And that way everybody can know how we're doing and can help us work towards the right direction of what we need to focus on and what we need to improve. And the big thing that we found in doing this over the past 5 years is that really opening up the books and saying, here it is, it's transparent. And we did all types of scoreboards and showing the information. That part wasn't the hard part. The hard part was actually educating and teaching all of our employee owners what these numbers mean, and more importantly, how do they translate that into what they do every day, into decisions that they make and actions they take, so that we're all moving towards the right common goals. If you want to go to the next slide there, a little bit more about the great game of business. It's was started in Springfield, Missouri in the 1980s. An engine remanufacturing company was purchased by a dozen guys that borrowed money from the bank because they wanted to save the 100+ jobs rather than that being purchased by some other corporation and moving to another town. So they did that successfully. And then they realized that none of them knew how the business worked. They didn't know how the finances worked. They didn't know how they made money. They just knew their specific jobs. So they undertook this whole process to learn it together and to get everyone involved in it. And that turned into a whole separate company they have now, the Great Game of Business. So it's really transformed our company. When I started, I was one of like 2 or 3 people that knew how the company was doing, really down to the details of our finances and our debt and how profitable we are and where we had issues. And now every single person in our organization has access to that information, and we work really hard to make sure that they understand it and that they know what it means. The 3 principles, as I discussed there before, know and teach the rules is the education. Following the action and keep score is empowering people through transparently sharing all of that information. And then the 3rd principle is provide a stake in the outcome. So for a traditional company that is owned by an individual or a couple people, that's going to be some type of a profit sharing. But for an ESOP or a co-op where you are giving actual shares of the company, that's already built in. So that's the last piece in this, how the Great Game Business was started. But really, it's set up perfectly for an employee-owned company because you already have that stake in the outcome. And now you just need to educate and empower. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide there. So how we did this and how we use some of this is the education piece. I teach lemonade stand accounting. It's a basic accounting course. It's a 1 hour a week for about 10 weeks it takes us. And it really goes through learning the basics of accounting and a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet through a lemonade stand. So it tries really hard to be basic level. And then we translate that into, here's our profit and loss statement, here's our balance sheet, so that everybody understands the results when we show them to them. And then they're expected to participate in forecasting and budgeting with us. We also use a lot of games where we will bring back that terminology, bring back our results, bring back our share price, any of the information that we really want people to internalize and really know. Just to reinforce that, we do a lot of games. We give prizes away to people. I put one of the examples here. If anyone's looking for a tool like that, it's called Kahoot. And it's an app that we pre-populate a quiz in there with whatever information we want. And then everyone has the app on their phone and can answer along. They all get a free version of it. And everybody in our company loves it. And then we'll give away a little prize to whoever wins it. So we do a lot of things where they're ongoing, they're constant. And, you know, a big part of it is it has to become a ongoing part of the culture is that education that we're talking about. When we get new employees, it's not we educate them and then it's done. It's an ongoing forever process. We try to get some of the more experienced employee owners to, train the trainer program so that they can help me teach future employees, but it's really part of our culture now that is baked in. And when we do recruiting, that's one of the first things we tell them is no matter what your job is, you're going to be expected to learn a little bit of accounting so that you can help with manage the financial management of the company. So the ultimate goal there is that every single member of the organization knows how the company is doing. Are we doing well? Are we struggling and we need to refocus on something? And then hopefully they know exactly what drivers that they're responsible for and what their actions can do to help move us forward toward the goals. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So what we found is communication and participation are really the keys there. Because obviously, like I said, educating someone something once who's not, financial numbers may not be their strong suit. It is ongoing, constant communication that we have to do in order to get the participation there. So more specifically, the way to start it is determining what the key metrics are. Maybe it's one or two. Maybe it's just your net profit and one of your key metrics, whatever it is that's very important. And those are posted and they're visible, whether it's in an actual physical space or on your intranet or somewhere else. And it's just regularly discussed, constant communication on it. Some examples there, what we do, daily huddles. We've got posters. There's a picture. That picture there is actually pre-pandemic. What we did, we had a huge whiteboard there. That's our profit and loss statement. And individual people track those metrics and report on them so that everybody is following along and watching how we're doing in the company. And when we're doing great, it's exciting and it's, everybody can celebrate it. And when we're not doing so well, it turns just naturally into discussions of, okay, what do we need to do? What can we fix? Where can we focus so that we can improve these metrics? So that's involving everyone there. We do that, like I said, in that picture there, we do a regular forecast. We do it on monthly forecast because that's our regular business cycle, but different industries or different businesses would do it on a different basis. And then there's also an annual budgeting process, which is called high involvement planning. And that also involves the entire organization. And the idea there being, we're not giving a budget to anyone. Every single person is involved in building it, because if you helped create it, then obviously we have buy-in from all of the employees, and you can really support it and help it move forward. So we even have a survey that goes out to every single person that says, do you think this is reasonable? Do you think we can achieve this? Do you think it's too aggressive, not aggressive enough? And get input on everything from everyone every year. And the goal there is that all of the employees feel that they are helping build this and manage this. And they always know where we are, where our goals are that we're trying to go, and how they can help move that forward. And that's really the whole purpose here. And as I said, it really fits in well what traditional business model, us as an ESOP, and awesome with co-ops to get everybody on the same page to actually achieve what we're trying to achieve. Go to the next slide, or is that all? That's it right there. So I think that was it on what I wanted to kind of give an overview of Great Game of Business and how we used it. I've been working with a couple co-op companies to help them determine what are their metrics that are most important and how they can engage and train all of their employees around following those.
I think there's one more slide that was nested somewhere else in the whole package, which is worker members' obligations.
Oh, I talked through that. That was earlier.
Okay.
So I skipped over it because I just gave the information without having the slide up.
Okay. Well,
so I think we're okay, Paloma, but I'd love to hear if people have questions for us. And Rebecca, I got to say, you guys sound like you could easily move to being a cooperative because you've got all the right energy and the right pieces around how you're thinking about what you're doing. It's a great example.
It is. It's very different financially for the owner, honestly. An ESOP is a way to transition it to actually sell it to the employees.
Yeah, no, I've seen that in my research. King Arthur Flour is structured as an ESOP, and they did a 3-stage buyout, but they have overlaid it with a very democratic structure. Being New Englanders, they understood New England town meeting, and they just implemented that so that they do quarterly meetings of the owners and monthly meetings that are like the social council in the Mondragon group. And they look for ways to extend participation financially, even to high school students working with them, which I think is great.
That is great.
So that the kids are coming out with something that can help them to pay for college. So.
Awesome. So I don't think we have any questions that have come in. I didn't put any links to Great Game of Business because it's really easy to Google it. They have a ton of resources out there if you want to go look at their website and get a better idea of what they do. They have a whole community platform that we're on now. So I didn't put any links to that, but just Google it and you will find their website and all their resources.
Paloma, you're muted.
I'm muted. Sorry. I have a question. So how do you approach your company? Like when you discovered this and you brought it to the team, like how did you approach them? Like what was like the selling point for them to start getting interested in this like great game of business?
Well, I was really lucky that the owner was interested in it because he, as an individual owner, he wanted to transition it to employees. So he actually brought it and said, what do you think? We went to the conference to see, and I got super excited about the idea of kind of bringing all of the employees into profit sharing and eventually employee ownership, and not being the only person in the company that knew how we were doing financially. So it takes a lot of work. I'd say that's the other learning from it. And while I didn't need to get it from the owner of the company, getting that buy-in or how to approach the team from the rest of the company was definitely one of our early challenges. And a lot of that was explaining the why. And I thought it would be an easy sell because there's a financial incentive at the end of it. There's a profit sharing bonus, but you're also asking people who didn't sign up to be accountants to learn some basic accounting, to be involved in forecasting and budgeting and things that, the majority of the roles in our company, that's not what they normally would think they're signing up for. Now that we're in it, we tell people that ahead of time. But I would say that was kind of the challenge, was explaining to people the why and the where we're going to end up, to really convince them to put in the time and the energy to learn these kind of things. And without that financial, either profit sharing or ownership, I don't think there would be a selling point to it, honestly. So I think the way you approach it is really the why. It's the end point. And study after study have shown it's also profitable. It's not only good for all of your employees, it is a competitive advantage.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's important with this that I think I heard what you were saying, Rebecca, is that it's important to build this in as part of the workday for people rather than seeing it as something they have to do outside the workday, so that they know that not only is it important, that you think it's important as well.
Yeah, totally. It has to be like a regular, that regular cadence, that rhythm, that it just becomes kind of a habit. We have a real quick everyday meeting where we look at metrics every morning. Mm-hmm. We have once a week, we look at the financials. And at the beginning, it was a struggle to get everyone there together because everybody's too busy with their focus of what their main role is in the company. But now that we've been doing it for years, it's second nature. Everybody knows on Tuesday morning, that's what you have to do. Once a month, we have our longer meeting. So yeah, that's definitely, it's really important, and it's kind of hard. And I think one of the big things it takes is time and repetition.
Yeah.
So there's a couple questions, one in the chat, other ones landed in the Q&A. So if you want me to read them, and the Q&A one is, this seems so great, just like nonstop, lot of work to keep everyone on the same page. And the question is, where does the responsibility for doing this work lie? Is that someone's full-time job? It's someone's full-time job. And then he also is asking, who managed the work around engaging employees? And there's more questions.
So for that, so the Great Game of Business has coaches and consultants that can help do this for you. If you're a company that has money to, get consultants and such, which the majority of small companies or co-ops do not, we self-implemented using their books and such. We gave out a copy of the book to all of our employees and asked everyone to read it so they could kind of get inspired by it. But the real answer to the question is, as the VP of Finance, the accounting finance only person in a small company, I have been doing that on top of my other things. So if you have that key person that has the knowledge and kind of the inspiration, wants to do it, that's great. Otherwise, an outside resource you might need, because it is hard to find that time. And the first couple years, it takes a lot more work of trying to get people involved. Now we've been doing it long enough that people get it. And other people are asking questions, initiating the conversations. If I'm late on reporting things, people will be asking me where it is. So the first couple of years, if you had an extra resource that didn't have another job, it would be great. But in our case, I was the one that took on the responsibility of that.
And another question is, how important is the frequency of profit share feedback? Once a year, such as with shares at TIA worker co-op, seems not, and he says it seems not frequently enough. And I would say there's more questions in the chat. So that's one.
Yeah, so we started with a quarterly bonus, which we consider kind of the short-term reward. And then we have our share price that we find out every year, which is kind of more the long-term, because you're not going to get that till it's basically a retirement plan. So we have quarterly bonuses. So that's how often we do it. We also do mini games sometimes if we need a short period of time, and something like right now we really need to reward people to change this specific metric or behavior, and then we'll do that. We would do that on like 1 month, between 1 and 3 months long, and then give a reward for that really quickly.
So the other question is there a place where INTRUST meets with other people on regular basis about the GGOB or something similar?
We should start doing it again, because I think I met the co-op Cincy group at an open book management, a Cincinnati open book management networking group that we had started years ago that we stopped. But Flecker, I would love to get it started again, maybe. Because otherwise there's not currently.
And then I would say, Flecker, that Co-op Cincy offers a basic financial literacy education piece, but not like deep dive into like open book management. And it's part of our regular team meetings. And then Hannah asked, it seems like GGOB works best when other forms of participation and ownership thinking culture are developed in all aspects of the company, not just financial management. Can you talk about some of the other ways your company has built that ownership culture into daily practices?
Yes, we do try. And, it's kind of a balance, because we do still have a traditional management structure. So it's a little bit of a balance between getting people to understand we do still have a regular management structure, but also empower them all to think like owners. So we have things like we have a culture club team, committee, whatever you want to call it, that anybody can volunteer to be on. And that team meets once or twice a month. And they're supposed to look at the culture and how people are doing, and what should we use resources for to further our ownership mentality and our connection with everyone. Because I think a lot of it, Hannah, and that's a great question, is about really empowering people to feel like they're not just here because it's a job and they want a paycheck. It's that whole sense of there's something more here. This is a bigger community. I'm here for some bigger purpose. I think it's not just about feeling like an owner. I think it's feeling more like you're part of something bigger.
And then Christopher asked if you can talk more about mini games. And he just asked, I might miss this, but how frequently throughout the work week are the open book sessions?
All right, so I'll answer the short second one first there. We have once a week where we go over our entire profit and loss forecast for the current month, so weekly, but we have it available online anytime for people, so people can look at the information anytime that they want. But then once a week we go over it. And then mini games, and you can look at the Great Game Business website. They probably talk about mini games on there, but the idea is if there's a specific metric or a specific behavior that you're wanting to improve or change within the company, that setting up a mini game around it. And we have a template that says, we want to change this metric from its current number X to the number Y. We hope to do that in the next 2 months. And here's how we're going to measure it. And then we'll make some crazy big scoreboard where you can see it, like a big thermometer or something. We had a car going up a track, whatever. And it's large and everybody can see it and they know what they're supposed to do to improve it. And then there's a reward, usually a couple of different levels of rewards. And the idea is that once you have changed that behavior, improved that metric, hopefully it's become a habit and you're going to stay there.
So we are at 5 minutes before closing our session. I would like to invite Christina and Rebecca to have like a little closing statement. And if anybody has any question, this is your time now.
Okay, so one thing that came to mind as Rebecca was talking about these different elements to what they're doing at her company is, at Mondragon, they had the basic structure of governance being one member, one vote, representative democracy from the get-go. They had labor problems in the 70s, and they established the social councils to create better communication between the workers and management. And that was good, but they still were struggling with chronic problems around quality and how to improve that. And with the Baldrige Award and the development of ISO standards, starting first with one of the cooperatives, Moix, which is a thermoplastics manufacturer for the auto industry, they instituted total quality management teams throughout the cooperative, first at Moix, and then extended this to other cooperatives, but on a participatory management model, so that everybody was charged with not only thinking about the work as owners, but also thinking about their ability to contribute to improving the quality of what they were doing in the production. And that has really been, I think, an important piece to how do you create essentially a 360 model for effective participation and democracy in the workplace.
Yeah, and that's almost like an operational equivalent. The total quality management, that's like your operations to get the quality. It's almost like a similar model. We're talking about the finances, and that's really talking about the quality of operations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you need both.
Totally.
You absolutely need both.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. So that's my final words of wisdom.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. I'm super excited. Like I said, once I started working with Co-op Cincy, I just thought it was such a great organization, and I'm happy anytime I can help their member co-ops move their goals forward in any way. So I'm hoping to continue working with some of the co-ops on this. So this has been great, and I love this event. So thanks so much for everybody being part of it.
Yeah, I do too. I'm sorry I'm not going to be there in person this time.
Well, we hope to see you next 2 more years.
2 more years.
So as we close our session, I'm so grateful for you both to be here, for taking the time, willing to be here. Thank you everybody for participating and for the great questions. So right now we have again a little break. You can go into the networking options, and then we have our closing session, which is going to be called, if you're looking for it, I'm looking for it too, so I can give you the right answer. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking for it.
Concluding experience.
Yes, concluding. This is perfect. That was a cooperation right there, right now. So concluding experience, so you can check on the session. That should be great. For those who are coming in person tomorrow, we'll meet up at 9 in the morning. Most of the sessions are in Peasley, but a couple of them will be either in Dayton, remote, or in Sustainrgy. So make sure that you check your calendar and are sure where you're going. Thank you so much, everybody. We are 1 minute to close the session. Thank you again, Christina and Rebecca, and I see you in the next session. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye now.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.